right. Wow. Wow. This is amazing. Thank you so much for having me here today. When I came in this morning, we looked at the auditorium, it looked amazing, but now that the seats are full, it looks even more amazing. Okay, LambEx. Wow. Wow, we're here, finally. Just for me to get a feel of this, put your hand up if you have seen me speak before. Okay, yep, I've got a couple. Put your hand up if you are, no, I won't say Australian, if you're from New Zealand. Oh, there's a lot of you. Okay, if you're from any other country that's not Australia and New Zealand. Okay, all right, cool, very cool. This is exciting. All right, we are going to start off. All right, obviously I'm talking nutrition, and so I have to put this up there. Please be aware, this is about the science of nutrition, all right? So yes, it is very interesting, it is important, but if you have a health consideration for yourself, do not apply this to yourself personally unless you go talk to your doctor. All right? I'm not here to give personal nutrition advice. We're talking about the science of nutrition and where lamb fits into this whole mix. Okay, unlike probably everybody in this room, I do not have a farming background by any stretch of the imagination. My dad's a robotics engineer, my mom's an English teacher, I come from South Africa, I've lived in Australia for 36 plus years of my life. So I don't have that ag background. So I've had to learn about sheep. So I flew from Brizzy down to Melbourne in November. I met with Mark Ingalls. He took me out to the Ballarat stockyards. I learned how to buy sheep. Then I went out to Trawalla and learnt about corkscrew worms, walked through the Thomas Foods abattoir, learnt about fine merino wool, and then I flew back home. And I thought, this is amazing. I didn't realize that this little fluffy creature was so complicated. But the grass where I went was very green and it was beautiful, lots of rain. And I thought, well, what about the rest of Australia, because most of Australia doesn't have green grass and lots of rain. So I sent out a message on social media to Gillian Fennell, you might know her, and I said, you guys have, you literally grow cows in the desert. Do you know any sheep producers that are like that? So I flew back to Adelaide, got in a car, drove up to Karawaloo, and on the way I stopped at Snowtown. I met some people who are here today, learnt about the outback at the bush place, and then saw a sheep station in the bush, and that just blew my mind. I'd never been to the outback. It took sheep to get me out there. Stopped at corn, learnt about mixed farming, and then went back home. And now I'm thinking, okay, this is really different. So I've seen the grassy area, I've seen the red dirt area. What about sheep that have to grow in cold places? How do those farmers deal with that environment? So I got on another plane, and I flew myself to New Zealand. Where else would you go, right? And that was very interesting. To go out there, get off in Christchurch, get another hire car, go down to Ashburton, learn about regen farming, drip water feeding, Ranfurly, the coldest place, it was freezing, and then I actually ate Swedes with the sheep in Dunedin, and then came back home. So all in all, this whole entire presentation is off the back of something like 13,000 kilometres. I've learned a lot about sheep. I've drunk a lot of tea. I even slept in a silo. How many of you have done that? Got asked a lot of questions at border security. Ate so much of lamb. And my wardrobe in the last couple of months has grown exponentially. I have got so many woolen things, even though I live in Brisbane. And I've had the opportunity of talking to many, many, many farmers. And so I realized something, comparing sheep to beef, that it is a story about food and fibre. I heard that all the time, and about relevance and how we've become somewhat irrelevant. So I want you to reflect on some lessons between the two big red meats in this country, beef versus lamb, and how did we get here? So in all of my work, prepping for this, reading a lot of research and talking to people, I even ate the food that the sheep eat, I wanted to actually taste test it. The Swedes were amazing. The saltbush was definitely not. The middle one is in New Zealand, and they were growing kale, and they learned how they move the line 7 meters or something every day, which was Why would you do this? And then in Trawala, well, I never actually got to taste the canola seeds because they were too small, but just learning the complexity of what producers do. Now, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from today, and I haven't actually written a slide on this, but I want you guys to get it in your head. You are the scientific expert in your environment, and don't let anyone else take that away from you. I know there's a lot of pressure and you're hearing it, and farmers and ag seems to be on the back foot and having to defend themselves all the time, and you've got the experts who are telling you guys what you do. You are the expert in your space. And it is absolutely epic how you are able to produce food and fiber in this environmental constraints that you have no control over. It's pretty epic. So do not ever let anyone take that away from you, all right? The other thing that have come to conclude is 3 major points. Firstly, sheep farmers know their stuff. You know your stuff. Your genetics is phenomenal. Your knowledge of the environment is phenomenal. Your knowledge of how to get stock rates from your paddock sizes, phenomenal. You know your stuff. Sheep are not actually boring creatures. I went into this naively thinking that they were simplistic. They're not simple at all. I think they've got this in their head that, like, how many ways can we try to die? And then farmers have to, like, work out strategies to combat that. Very different to cattle. And then I learned that wool actually absorbs carbon from the air. Like, that just blew my mind. I'm like, are you for real? And so when these farmers were telling me this, they're like, yeah, the wool grows and absorbs carbon from the air. It's like 50% carbon. I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, this is legit. This is like a vacuum cleaning sponge that cleans the environment. And he's like, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. That's kind of, yeah, it does do that. So everybody should wear wool. That's like my new thing. Everybody buy wool, wear wool, because we're going to clean the air with wool. There's things that you do that you don't even see how awesome it is. So here's a bit of rethinking for you. We've heard it. Australia was built in the back of sheep. The irony is, I actually looked this up yesterday, the first song that was written about sheep is Waltzing Matilda in 1895. And it wasn't until about 1970 that there was a song written about cows. So, like, sheep have definitely, they've been riding this way for a while. What's gone wrong? What has gone wrong? Now, what we're going to do today, there is a lot that we're going to unpack. So I'm going to take you on the complexity of how we got here and some different ways of thinking going forward. So I'm going to define what nutrition really is. Now, for a lot of people, nutrition is parked off with weight loss, weight management, dealing with diabetes, heart disease, all that sort of stuff. And yes, nutrition does affect that, but it is so much more than that. And farmers are the start of nutrition. You are just as important as I am. You are just as important as a medical doctor, possibly even more so, because you guys actually create nutrition. It all starts with you. I'm going to set the scene of who we are collectively. I'm including myself in this after eating with the sheep, and understand what is the impact of public health and what does meat have to, what role it plays in health. And then we're going to compare some lessons from the other red meat, from beef. And then let's go forward from there, yeah? All right, so starting with our appetizer, what is nutrition? Why does it matter? Why do farmers matter? All right, first point, we eat food, not nutrients. Unless you were ill, unless you were a newborn or a preemie, unless you have got some sort of medical need, you'll be sitting down to a plate of supplements. But the rest of us, we eat food. But food is our primary source of nutrients. Unless that food is eaten, the nutritional benefit is not received. So we got to eat that food. Food is our primary source of nutrition. All right? Now, when it comes to nutrition, this is, I think I start most presentations off with this now. It is a really great statement that nutrition is not the concept of a single food or a single nutrient. Right now, protein is like the flavor of the month. Fat had a bit of problem in the 1980s, and it's still really trying to get its way up there. But it's not the concept of one nutrient or one food. It is about nutrition that comes from the sum total of everything that we eat or drink over time. Nutrition-related health outcomes stems from the combinations of these foods. So I want you guys to realize that you are one piece of the nutrition jigsaw puzzle. What is your role as producers of a nutrient-dense food product? Yeah? Now, by the way, so those are all me, and it's easy to judge people when you look at what they eat. I guess you could say I started as a food scientist when I was 2, when I got introduced to grapes. And so if you looked at that and you didn't know me, it'd be easy to say, yeah, this person, like they're into that, ultra-processed junk food type diet. The truth is, that is the only pretzel I've ever eaten in my life, which was 15 years ago. I'd never had it before and I've never had it afterwards. I find it very bland. And I just wanted to literally taste these different products. So it is about what are we eating over time. No food is guilty and no food should make you feel guilty. It is about dietary quality. So there's room at the plate for everything. Now, when we talk about nutrients and nutrition, we've got our macros, we've got our micros, and we've got our what we call non-nutrients. What a crazy word. Our macros are essentially the things that give us energy, all right? So carbs, proteins, fat. Yes, alcohol does give us energy, but that is pretty much all it gives us. That's why it's up there. And so per gram, they all provide different amounts of energy. So macro means larger. We need more than 1 gram per day because of the energy component. So once you that's all I'm going to go into this in as much detail. But the main thing we can see is that fat provides us with the most amount of energy per gram. Protein and carbs provide very similar, but their role in how full we feel is actually different. And that affects how much we want to eat. Okay, so then we've got our micros, and micro means we need less than 1 gram, so teeny tiny amounts. And that's our vitamins, we've got our 22 minerals, we've got other compounds, our non-nutrients like our polyphenols, our flavonoids. So blueberries have got anthocyanins, which is great for your heart, red wine, chocolate, all those sort of things have got polyphenols and flavonoids. So they have a different effect on how our body functions. And then the last thing we've got to take into consideration is our digestive tract. This is my favorite part of the human body. I love it. I think it is the center of everything. We've got our stomach that breaks things down. We have our small intestine, 6 meters of small intestine. Think about that. It's roughly about the length of an adult male giraffe, who is 6 meters tall. All packed into this area. That's where absorption takes place. So whatever's broken down in our stomach goes into our small intestine so we can absorb those nutrients. And whatever is not absorbed ends up in our colon, which is roughly about 2 meters long. And that's where our gut bacteria live. So interesting points. You hear about the gut microbiome. You can use this personally. When you eat, you've also got to think about what is your gut bacteria wanting to eat, because they don't get a choice. They got to eat everything that is not absorbed, and their choice, if they could choose, would be fibrous food. That's what they actually like and is good for them. So then we go into our colon, it does its thing, and along the way we do actually have some bacteria, and they play different roles in how we actually ferment, how we absorb. Good bacteria do a great job, they produce great byproducts, and the negative bacteria create unhealthy environments so that we can end up with leaky gut, creates an environment that makes it more conducive to colon cancers, things like that. So we've got to take this whole physiology into consideration when we talk about nutrition as well. Makes it more complicated, right? So nutrition scientists, we look at what's in a food, we eat it, goes into our body, we try and work out what is doing what at our DNA, in our muscles, all those sort of things, and what is that health effect. So it is not a simple science. It is actually quite complicated, and it makes it difficult to say, here's your top 5 superfoods, this is how much you should eat, because you've got a different digestive system. I mean, the physiology is pretty much the same, but you're different to me. So it has to be personalized to you, right? Now, for me, nutrition became really real when I started working in infant formula. I was the chief scientist for a formula company, and my consumers were premature infants. And so they're literally struggling to survive. And I had to consider the 40 ingredients that go into that formula as nutrients, not as ingredients. What is the role of this nutrient? How is it going to affect this child's development, or am I going to kill them? And how do I actually work that out? So it started taking a very different perspective for me, and I started seeing food in a very different light. Fast track a couple of years into the future, 2020 happens, the whole world shuts down, COVID happens. COVID did not actually affect me. What happened to me is at the start of the year, I was given some meds for an injury, which ironically I was allergic to. I was allergic to the medication. I fell over, hit my head on concrete, and ended up with a really bad brain injury. So I was in ICU for 30 hours, then I was in the brain damage ward for 8 days, and then I spent 6 months for the rest of that year, learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to move, pretty much from scratch. The only thing that was working was my left arm, and I'm not left-handed, I'm right-handed. So it was pretty intense. A lot of physical therapy went into that year, and I could not eat. I was not allowed to eat. I had to just be on liquids. And that, I think out of everything, that was the worst thing could happen, because my entire career is based on food and nutrition and eating and understanding the physiology of the human gut. So I told my doctors, hey, I got an idea. I know you guys are experts, but this is my expertise. Can we try something? Because I don't want to be living on 12 tablets and 3 injections in my stomach for the rest of my life. And so they let me do it, and I did my supplementary therapy on myself for 6 weeks, did all my readings, did my physiotherapy, and you can see it. This is who I am today. I've got pretty much none of the long-term effects that I thought they would have. So yes, I've got the science, I've got the theory, I understand this, but there is not a single person on this planet that can tell me nutrition is not essential for the functioning of every single person. Nutrients fuel our cells. We cannot get away from that. And good nutrition does good stuff, and if we have a lot of negative nutrition, that's going to do a lot of negative stuff, right? So that is why nutrition matters, and that's why you guys matter, because you create it. So let's have a look at who we are and how we got here, okay? So the first thing we've got to realize that society on the whole is changing. We're growing. And by 2100, it's really weird to say that, 2100, we'll be roughly at about 10 billion, and we will probably stay that way because our birth rate and our death rate will pretty much equal out. So we've got a few more billion to grow, about 2.5 to 3 billion to go. And where we have the growth rate happening is largely in Asia, Africa, a bit of South America. But you'll see there's 2 places in the world that we don't seem to be having this epidemic, this exponential growth, and that is Alaska and Australia. That's because it's too cold up there and it's too hot down here. We all live on the circumference. So this is the amount of people per kilometre of land area. We are a big country. And we all live in urban areas on the coastline, and the rest of the country is left to who? And now I've seen the outback is left to the cows, the camels, and the sheep. So if you have a look at that, even New Zealand's got more people than we do, per kilometre of land mass. We're positioned. Because we've got so much area, we're actually positioned to actually support feeding the countries around us. That is a good thing. Own that. Where do we see these population growths happening? So across the world, doesn't matter which country, continent, region you're in, from the 1950s to 2050, it is overwhelmingly in the urban environments. So rural communities, there's less of you out there, but we are relying super heavily on you guys. That is a lot of responsibility and a lot of pressure. That actually drives me to do what I do. Because I think you guys are literally our first line of defense in the fact that you feed our nations. Now, because we're growing exponentially all over the world, we're staying alive a lot longer as well. This is our protein demands over time. It is increasing all over the world by default because we have more people. Now, if you've seen at the start, 1960, Australia started at 71 grams of animal-derived protein. And by 2017, we're consistently consistent. We're still at 71 grams of animal-derived protein in our diet. New Zealand, I'm so sorry. You guys didn't feature on Our World in Data. I think you're a bit too small for them, but couldn't find you guys up there. But what is really important to see is some of these countries like China, Brazil, India. Like India looks like it has a little bit, 15 grams, but in 1960, animal-derived protein was only 5 grams of their diet. And across 1.3 billion, we've had a 3-fold increase. That's huge. Now, I cannot tell you if that's beef or lamb or dairy. Obviously, it probably isn't actually that much beef in India. But it is animal-derived. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. We need it. When it comes to plant exclusivity, in Australia, we're only 2% plant exclusive. And we've been that way for a while. New Zealand, you're actually roughly about 0.75% of your population are plant exclusive. For those who do drink nut milks, that is not an indicator that they are becoming plant exclusive. Nut milk drinkers usually have, 30% of the population have nut milk once a week in their diet, in a smoothie or in a coffee or something like that. Does not mean to say that they've got rid of other animal products from their diet. It's not a good indicator of plant exclusivity. Most people do it. What we do know is that people who choose a plant exclusive diet for health reasons, overwhelmingly, 84% of them will go back to being an omnivore within 5 years. You can do health on a plant exclusive diet, but you do need to have a higher income, you need to eat a lot more food, and you need to do it strategically. So having an omnivore diet is actually a lot easier to attain health. And we also know, this is done by the Canadian government, that for those who choose to be plant exclusive, 60% of them in Canada have said that we will go back to being an omnivore if we know that the animals are treated humanely. So that just shows that there is a breakdown in their level of understanding. There is way too much noise in the information that is available. And if we are not sitting at the table representing and being transparent about what we do, someone else is going to take that seat and they may not represent us accurately. So me going out to all these sheep places, I just could not believe how dedicated the farmers are to their sheep. I just couldn't, this is not efficient use of time. And that's what I actually said to, I think, to Scott Michael at the Carrawaloo station. I'm like, this is really poor efficiency. He's like, these are my sheep, Anneline. I have to look after my sheep. And, efficient time management person like me is like, wow, I feel convicted now that you said it that way. We also know that those who choose to buy plant-based alternatives in the supermarket in Australia, you're standing there and you're surveying them and they're buying that veggie sausage or that veggie burger or that nut milk. It is not actually because they're animal activists or they're doing this from an environmental perspective. Overwhelmingly, they are choosing these products because of the perception of health. They believe that it is healthier for them. It is going to improve their cholesterol, decrease their phlegm production, improve their gut microbiome. So there is a perception of health that drives them to these products. Now that tells me, as a nutrition scientist, we're not communicating the nutritional benefits of our animal-derived products very well. And why is this? Well, chronic health diseases are a big problem. And there's good reason for this. We do have a lot of issues with chronic health conditions globally. It is growing everywhere. But let's look at Australia. In 2017, compared to the rest of the world, we are not doing that great. Sure, we're living for a long time. Yay us. But we're not doing that great in terms of obesity, in terms of alcohol consumption, and in terms of coronary heart disease. We're not doing that great. We are doing amazing at our colon cancer survival rates because we do the scanning. If you are over 55, do your poop test. It is important. Make sure you do your poop test. The earlier we can find it, the better we can treat it. So we've got amazing longevity of survival, but we also have a lot of people who are getting colon cancer. Now, if we look at the spending, the health system spending on health risks, all right? So these are all of the risks related to diseases that are killing people prematurely. And we look at the ones that are directly related to diet, all right? Out of roughly $23.6 billion that is spent every single year treating health risks, $16.2 billion is spent on diet-related health risks. Think about that. That is huge. 16.3 billion on issues that are largely lifestyle controllable. Comparing that to, like, say, tobacco use and illicit drugs, 16.2 billion is a lot. So you can understand why public health, the public health sector, is very up in arms against different aspects of the diet that they think is causing a lot of trouble. When we look at what Australians are actually consuming, okay, so here's our dietary guidelines, our healthy plate. The numbers you see on the outside are the recommended serves on average for different for men and women. So the number, like 5 is for women, 6 is for men, 2.5 protein, that is for women, 3 is for men, right? So that's the average serves that we're recommended to consume. This is what we're actually eating. We are flunking out legendary. We are scoring F pluses on our dietary intake. I don't understand how we are not making our fruit intake, because that's just 2 serves. How easy is that? Banana at breakfast and apple at afternoon tea, you're done. But we're not meeting our fruits. We are definitely not meeting our vegetable intake. We're not actually meeting our protein intake. We're not meeting our protein intake, and yet meat cops a lot of negativity against it. But what we are doing, super sensationally above and beyond, is our discretionary food. So the junk food category. Our meat pies, our sausage rolls, our pizza, our ice cream, our lollies. We're getting a minimum of 40% of our daily energy from that category. So if you have a diet that is packed with that, by default, you're going to have a diet that is lower in all the other good stuff. And so that's why the government of Australia has listed the dietary risk factors. So a diet that's low in legumes. So what this means, a DALY, disability adjusted life years, that is the amount of people who die prematurely, the amount of years of premature death, and the amount of life that's lost because they are unable to work or operate because of disability relating to a disease. So one DALY is 1 year. So if we look at, say, diet low in legumes, that's 60,000 years of potential life that is lost in the nation of Australia because of these issues. So you can understand, now that you guys are starting to feel it, you're seeing the picture, why are we, in the red meat world, why are we copying so much flack against us? And there's good reason, but it's also partially because we don't explain how good we are and how much we should be having. Now, looking at our mains, all right, we're into our mains, lamb versus meat. Now, when I looked at the nutritional, the reason why this really threw me is because from a nutritional perspective, there's not a whole lot of difference between lamb and beef. We're very similar in a lot of ways. Yes, we are slightly higher, lamb is slightly higher in terms of overall fat. We get it. But the one thing that is really tough for lamb is that we are much lower in vitamin B12. B12 is essential. We only get it from red meat because when the cattle or the sheep eat the grass, they ferment that in their rumen, in their gut, and their bacteria produce B12, which gets into their muscle tissue, and we eat that meat, and that gets into us. B12 is essential. It is the vitamin that helps our bodies take energy out of carbohydrates. We cannot actually access that energy if we don't have B12. So we need B12. It's really, really, really important. Now, if you look at how much we need, 2.4 micrograms per person, per adult, like beef is easy. Per 100 grams, you've got it. Whereas lamb, you've actually got to eat 2.5 times more. And that's because it's so young. Mutton's great. Mutton's fine. Because it's longer, it's older, it's had time to mature in its body. So that's something I think that if we're doing some marketing with lamb, we really need to articulate that properly, get that out there. So that's all I'm going to talk about, the nutritional comparison between meat, because I've been thinking and I've been asking, why is it that beef is much more thought of, much more consumed than lamb? Now, when it comes to decision making, there's 2 ways we think. We make rational thoughts, which is slow processes. We're very considered in our approach. We're very deliberate. It's complex decisions. It usually results in some type of accuracy. Things like buying a house. You don't just walk out the door and buy the first house you see. You look, you do your homework, you apply for it, you check out the neighborhood. If you're a surgeon and you're like, oh yes, you've got a brain tumor, come into my office, I'll just cut it. No, surgeons never do that. They do their homework. They get all their MRI tests done. They check, they work out what is the best line of attack for this medical consideration. If you're doing a trip around the world, you're going to look at your flights, look at your routes, look at how much it costs, look at your different airlines, working out. So it's very deliberate thinking processes, where heuristic thinking is not. Heuristic thinking is based on our experiences. It's based on knowledge that we know. So it's a shortcut in our brain to hopefully get to where we want to go very fast. It's very quick. It's almost automatic. We don't even realize we're doing it. Everyday decision making. So things like, should I take an umbrella when I go out today? Is it going to rain? Yes. Like, it's just really short, sharp, fast thinking. Should I ride my bike or go rollerblading? Now, that's going to depend on if you're good at rollerblading or riding your bike, if you've fallen off, if you had a good experience. You will choose that in that moment. And food choices are the other one. When we go and do shopping, you've got roughly about 7 seconds to get a consumer's attention to your food product. They're not there with their spreadsheet doing a list of pros and cons on why I should buy this piece of meat, or why I should buy this breakfast cereal, or why I should buy this bottle of milk. You got 7 seconds to get their attention if it's a new product. If they bought it before, they're just going to buy it again and again and again. So really quick thinking. But it is based on experience. It is based on societal influences. So how do we get, given that food and what you do is so complicated and nutrition is complicated, how do we get people, how do we get consumers to start making fast choices that are actually beneficial without taking their laptop and doing a spreadsheet in the supermarkets? Now, I went and I asked consumers. I did a lot of questioning and asked a lot of random people, hey, how you on? I just want to ask you a question. I'm going to say a statement. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to give me your very first response and tell me why. Beef or lamb, which one would you choose? And this was a lot of what came up. Beef first, lamb second. If there's no salmon, I didn't even ask them about salmon, and they brought salmon up, right? Beef is a premium eating experience. Lamb is my grandma's roast. Hopefully the grandma's roast is nice, right? Why would you choose lamb when you could eat a juicy steak? I found that one really interesting because they spoke about lamb and they compared it to a specific cut of beef. Like, I'm not talking about lamb roast versus steak. I'm asking you about this animal versus that animal. And yet they differentiate beef based on how you use it. But they did not differentiate lamb. I think beef is cheaper, right? They actually asked me that question. I'm like, well, you buy it. I mean, so you just go buy beef because you think it's cheaper. You haven't actually checked the price point. Okay, fascinating. I don't have a slow cooker. Beef is faster. So you won't buy lamb because you don't have a slow cooker. You've never actually tried cooking it because you have this perception that it is harder to cook. You can do anything with beef. I don't know how to cook lamb. I think it'd be time consuming. I don't have the time invested to go research how to cook lamb. Roast beef in the bag at Woolies is better than the pork one. Very specific. But if they did a lamb one, I'd probably buy that because I like roast lamb better than I like roast beef. So you can kind of start seeing, why are people doing what they're doing? I went to the butchers. Now, this is actual butcher shops, not like your supermarkets. And I asked them, tell me, what do you guys sell? Which one, more or less, and why? A lot of them were like, well, yeah, we definitely sell more beef than lamb. We have way more offerings of beef. Chicken sells out the most, followed by pork, and then beef, obviously subject to areas. Lamb and turkey are seasonal. And there's lots of beef options. We think we get more beef from the carcass, so maybe it's cheaper. They're selling it. And they didn't even compare the price points. Consumers think lamb is hard. I went to restaurants and I asked the chefs, hey guys, can I sit down? Tell me what your consumers are buying and why. Definitely more beef than lamb. Beef or fish, then chicken, and then lamb, and then the vegetarian options. There's only so much you can do with lamb that consumers can recognize. Why would you order a lamb when you can have a steak? One steak shop, they did not have any lamb on the menu at all because no one buys it. Why would we do that? I went to the supermarket and I had a look at what is actually for sale. And overwhelmingly, you can see there's heaps and heaps of beef, heaps and heaps of chicken products. lamb is very minimal. And so I thought, why is this? Now, the best way to work out what people use is to go look at what is available in the ready meal section, because that's going to tell you how they cook at home. And in the ready meal section, stacks of beef, stacks of chicken. There was one lamb product, and it was lamb shanks on mash. Now, if you're a person like me who doesn't like mash, as much as I like lamb, I will never buy that because I don't like mash. Only one offering. The presentation looks very different. Supermarkets, you can obviously tell this is in Woolies, lots of single-serve options for beef. Whereas lamb
What did you just say?
was very, sorry, that's my dad. Lamb was a very small section, big serve packs for families, things like that. Then we did some taste testing, and I got Dad to do it.
The first one, Alba.
Alba, hey Alba.
It's juicy but not fatty. You can taste fat in the second one, a little bit.
Yeah.
And it tastes like lamb, more like the loin chops.
The second one.
Yeah.
More like the normal lamb we're used to getting.
Yeah, but still a lot tender than the lamb.
So it was interesting to get his perspective. And I did it with a couple of his age groups. So my dad's 67. I asked a few of his mates to come over, and we did this to get their take. And they overwhelmingly, like with beef, they knew their stuff. But with lamb, and I wanted to compare it between a sheep that does meat and wool versus I was told by the butcher that the Alba White, that's just meat and it doesn't do any wool. And I wanted to see, is there a taste difference? So it's interesting because you can actually taste it, but lamb is not positioned that way, whereas beef is. So we're nearly at the end, all right? So we've seen some insights. You've understand the world that we're in. You're seeing the challenges that you guys are facing, and it's coming at you from all different angles. First thing I want you to realize is that consumers actually trust farmers. And National Farmers did this, but it comes up when I even talk to them. They trust you guys. They think you know what you're doing when it comes to farming, but they don't believe you that you're doing the right thing. How do you have trust and not believe? How crazy is that, right? They trust that you know how to farm because I live in the city. I don't know how to farm. So hopefully they're doing the right thing. We'll leave it to them. But do I believe that they're improving the environment? No. Do I believe that they're doing the best for their animals? No. Do I believe that they prioritize consumer safety without using pesticides? No. Why don't you believe that? Because there is so many inputs that are telling me otherwise. So we need to change that. If you can have belief and trust, that's really important. Now, this is a picture of this little child. This is why nutrition matters. They have got all the energy they actually need, even though they look severely malnourished. And the problem is they don't have enough protein to get the energy out of the food. So the guy in the middle, he's a pediatrician. He told his friend, who's a nutrition food scientist, we have this problem. And Michael, the food scientist, came up with Plumpy Nut. And it's super easy, peanut, sugar, skim milk powder, vitamins, minerals, all around the world. It's easy for these kids to get protein that's shelf stable. So here's a little child in Haiti, and you can see how skinny and unhealthy she is at a year old. And this is her 12 weeks later after eating Plumpy Nut. Nutrition saves lives. Now imagine if we could do that for lamb. So quick take-homes. I want you to realize that the product you produce has got a high nutritional biological value. It really does. There's a lot going for it. But how we frame lamb and how we position it, also the wool side of things, needs to definitely be updated. We have to explain what we're doing a lot more. And there's also some really cool medical applications for the use of wool. The 3 challenges for lamb, number 1, that you guys have to deal with is perception, especially flavor and health and cost, eating quality, applications. If you don't show them what to do, they won't know what to do, whereas beef does a great job of that, and transparency. In order to gain trust and establish credibility, you've actually got to get that belief. All right? So I want to leave you with this. Food is so much more than a full belly. It contains nutrients, and nutrients affect the function of every single cell in our body. That's why public health have an issue with the food industry. Farmers create food, food contains nutrients, and so farmers create nutrition. Now, I've created a solution for you guys. I'm about to do that. So this is what I think is needed. We need a strategic food production strategy where nutrition is underpinning it. And I've been thinking about this, working with the ag sector now for a couple of years. So right now I'm actually creating a course with an IT company that is nutrition focused to agriculture. Now, if you are interested to understand this, so you can get equipped with the tools you need, if you scan this QR code, it'll give you the opportunity to put your name, your email address, and so when we launch it, we will send it out to you guys, yeah? So that you can have the skills to actually represent your sector a lot better. Talking to activists, talking to your family, dealing with those sort of questions, you can do it. You can have Dr. Anneline in your back pocket. Thank you. If you've got any questions, you know where to find me. I will be here the entire week. Thank you for having me. And I hope you've got some really interesting pointers that are going to challenge the way that Lamb moves forward in the future.